welcome everyone to the 9th episode of Chat from the Old Cap, where we highlight stories and the work of University of Iowa alumni. My name is Amy Kassem, and I work in the Office of Alumni Engagement at the University of Iowa Center for Advancement. We are honored to have Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. join us for today's episode. Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. is recognized as one of the nation's top speakers and educators. He is founder of America and More LLC, which provides comprehensive diversity, privilege, and leadership trainings. He has presented at national and international conferences focusing on issues of diversity, youth, community, cultural competency, leadership, white privilege, and other forms of oppression. Moore is the director of the Privilege Institute and White Privilege Conference, both founded under his direction to provide opportunities for research, publications, speaking, and collaborations by those committed to true social and institutional change. He is co-founder of the online journal Understanding and Dismantling Privilege and is co-editor of the Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys, which recently was highlighted by Good Morning America as one of 8 books on race and privilege to learn how to be a white ally. So first, I just want to thank you for joining us today. We're very honored and excited to have you. And so I think we'll start with how you came to Iowa. So you received your PhD in Educational Policy and Leadership Studies in 2004 at the university. Can you tell us how you ended up at the University of Iowa and what your experience was like as a PhD student?
Yeah, well, Amy, actually, good to see you. Glad to be on. Go Hawks, go Hawks. Listen, my life, actually, my entire young adult professional life, I owe to the great state of Iowa. I got all my education, received all my education in Iowa. I went to Cornell College, where I graduated in 1989. And then I went on to Loras College, Dubuque, Iowa, where I got my master's degree. And then, of course, the University of Iowa. I got to Iowa because of a professor I met at at Loras College. Because when I went back to Loras College, I actually came as a grad assistant football coach. And I was solely focused on being a football coach. And I met a professor there, Michael Vavris, who really pulled me aside and challenged me to do more with my life outside of X's and O's, and worked with me through my master's degree and had some connections, some affiliations with the University of Iowa, and really helped me to see myself much farther than what I had in my mindset. And so I owe a great deal of my life and life success to Michael Vavris, the folks at Loras College, but also my high school basketball coach, who was from Grundy Center, Iowa, who went to Cornell College, that originally introduced my mom and I to Loras College through my football coach, who I still love and consider a father, Steve Miller and Ruth Miller. They were the ones who originally kind of reached out and got me even started. So it's hard to say how I got to the University of Iowa without talking about all the Iowa connections. As I always say to people, I know Iowa's got some challenges, even the university got some challenges around the issues that I work on day to day, every day. But I have to say, this is one Black man that loves Iowa because it really gave me an opportunity to see myself much farther than what I had in my mind when I was 18, 19 years old.
That's great. It's kind of like you had so many connections that brought you here, and we're really happy that you ended up here because you've done some great work. Could you tell us how your experience at Iowa influenced your current work at the Privilege Institute?
Yeah, well, my writing, my scholarship, a great deal of it is owed to the University of Iowa. I still remember one of my first PhD course professors, Dr. Michelle Young, that really introduced our cohort to the PhD process in a pretty, let's just say, challenging way. And it was really something that woke us all up and really put us on a path of PhD pursuit at the highest academic level. And Professor Young really introduced us to the rigor of scholarship. And that's been a big part of my career path. So how I read, how I write, how I produce scholarship, big part, or even how I bring research into my presentations, I owe a lot of that to the professors there at the University of Iowa during my PhD course, but specifically Professor Michelle Young, who kind of woke our entire cohort up to the rigor of obtaining a PhD. And if you're going to get it here at the University of Iowa and she's involved, it's going to be at the highest level. And I continue to maintain that academic excellence in all the work that I do.
Great. Well, most of your work has been specifically around the theme of privilege. Could you explain white privilege to everyone?
Yeah. My PhD research was on Black football players. It was really kind of the entryway into the work I do right now, because much of what I was doing as I was looking at Black football players was really trying to help these brothers out, do better, contribute better, do more, contribute more. And what I've learned that is there's been one consistent hurdle in the success and the excellence of Black boys, Black males, in the case of my study, and that was white supremacy, white privilege, white structures, white teachers, white educators. And so that's really where I've spent some of my career, additionally in focusing on supporting, assisting, fighting for Black excellence, Black genius amongst Black males, but also challenging systems of oppression, primarily fueled by white supremacy and white privilege. And white privilege, the understanding of that, it's really important to be connected to white supremacy. You can't say white privilege if you don't understand white supremacy. If you think of it in a metaphor of a cloud, white supremacy is the cloud above. White privilege is one of the things that sprinkles from, that comes from that. So white privilege simply is a benefit, a perk. Simply because of your white skin, you get rewards, you get benefits. Not that you earned them, not that you even asked for them, but because of that cloud's design on white supremacy as better, as supreme, and the things it distributes on the greater society, because you're white, you're at the front of the line in reference to receiving some of those. So the simplest way to understand it is a perk, a benefit. White privilege is a perk, a benefit that you get simply because of white skin.
Great. Thank you. And can you explain how intersectionality can impact privilege beyond race? You know, somebody who might say race is a class issue, or maybe they grew up poor. Could you explain how all of that intertwines?
Yeah, well, if you are familiar with the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, the inventor, creator of the term intersectionality, then that's been a big part of my, just scholarship and understanding of the work, that you can't talk about race if you're not talking about class, if you're not talking about ability, if you're not talking about sexual orientation, sexual identity. So intersectionality is a big framework, a big foundation to the comprehensive understanding. When someone says to you that they're competent around diversity issues, then they should have a comprehensive perspective around that. And intersectionality is really, for me, a foundation, a comprehensive framework to understand, to a commitment to really building a place that's a space that's welcoming, that's belonging to everyone. And you can't be for race and against sexual orientation. And how I understand it in reference to Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality is really understanding all those dynamics simultaneously, sometimes individually, sometimes together. But you got to have a competence and a commitment if, in my mind, you're truly trying to build a place of belonging, a place committed to diversity and inclusion.
Great. Well, many people are looking for ways to educate themselves right now on privilege and how privilege impacts racism in society. You have a program called the 21-Day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what resources you've put together, maybe how you developed it and what that is?
Yeah. Well, I'm not so convinced that many people are on board yet. In fact, I'm arguing that we require people to show some real evidence outside of their tears and their participation in some of what's happening at the moment as a way to demonstrate they're really on board. And so I think we really want to be careful about giving people credit during this kind of time, because there's a lot of stuff going on around us, and it can be really easy for people to participate in the moment as opposed to participating in the movement. And the 21-day action plan, I mean, originally, this is something we designed, I put out there 7 years ago, and it was the things to do. After the workshop, most people say, what can I do now, Doc? How can I follow up? And that's really what the 21-day action plan to do, to give you something specific, concrete to do after the workshop. Now we're seeing more and more people pick it up because of this time we're in. And what I'm asking people to do, if you're going to take on this plan, in the words of Capital One, all right, ask for proof. What's in your wallet? This is a chance, the 21-day action plan, for people to not only talk about it, but be about it. And that's what we need right now. And I'm just saying, for me, if you tell me I'm down, I'm interested, I want to participate. Right now, I'm saying I don't believe you. I mean, I want to see some proof. And so call me after 21 days. And here's something that you can participate in. And after these 21 days, if you've done it consistently, then we can start to say, okay, what can you do? But I don't want to be giving people the benefit of it. I mean, listen, I'm saying it this way, Amy. I just got to say this to the folks. Listen, I mean, the time we're in right now, we can't forget that people died so that we can be at this moment. And I'm not taking this moment lightly. I don't want to look back 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and say, oh, I believe somebody just because they said they were down. I want to say, I believed you because you were doing some stuff. And that's what the 21-day action plan is about. Action, evidence, proof that you are committed to the kinds of things that you're talking about, you're interested in taking action around today. And so I'm hoping it's free, and I'm hoping people pick it up and participate. And remember, it's proof of action.
Great. So in the plan, you essentially lay out some resources people can take and then some quantifiable steps that they can do after. So could you tell us a little bit more about the Privilege Institute and how you work with organizations to combat issues of diversity and race?
Yeah, so the Privilege Institute is our 501c3, the nonprofit. Really, our motto is, if you have a lot, you should do a lot. And so what we're trying to do is work with organizations, work with individuals who have an excess of resources, and they want to do some innovative, creative things to impact the community in a positive way. We're not approaching the community as if something's wrong, approaching segments of the community as if something's wrong with them. We're saying there are some real assets there, and we can put some innovation, some ideas, some resources there, and really bring out of there, as Tupac talked about, the rose in the concrete, so to speak. And that's what our mission is really about, working with those folks who want to do something with the things, the excess, the resources that they have, in a positive way, but challenging things, not the same old kumbaya diversity stuff. We talk about doing some innovative, challenging stuff, looking at white supremacy, white privilege, and other forms of oppression.
So you do a lot of work with, you have the resources for an individual. You work with the Privilege Institute that works on an organizational level. But then you also work with K-12 students and educators. Can you tell me a little bit about how you develop curriculum for K-12 students and educators, and maybe also something you've learned from teaching youth about diversity?
Yeah, let me start with the latter. What I've learned from kids is usually they're a lot farther along the developmental path than even some of the adults at their schools, their teachers even. And so what I've learned from young people is sometimes just giving them some tools and some real space to go with what they know already, so to speak, we can get a lot done. So I'm really careful not to be coming into a young space and saying, hey, here's what you need to do. My approach is, hey, how can I support? How can I help? Have you thought about this? And that's what I've learned working with young people. They're using some really good ideas. And curriculum-wise, I'm really feeling like sometimes the work of diversity is the only area where we keep kids at 101, kumbaya. And so what I'm trying to do curriculum-wise, it's like what we do with calculus or math, what we do with science, architecture, what we do with languages, is we give kids opportunity to develop, to advance, to evolve. And so with diversity, what I'm trying to do is, get some 101, get people on board, get them familiar with terms. But if young people are ready to look at white supremacy, white privilege, and other forms of oppression, to really develop some curriculum, some programming, so that those kids can advance and develop beyond their, sometimes what their years may say they're ready for in reference to these issues. And so that's the real curriculum approach that I'm excited about, is providing young people with some evolution, some different stages, some different phases. I'm developing what I call the CrossFit class for diversity. They're really tough opportunity. And I think kids are ready for that. At least some kids are. That we can't just be holding them back just because a few people or some people are not ready to be advanced, are ready to be challenged. And so that's the real curriculum advice I give folks and what I'm trying to develop curriculum-wise when I'm working with young people.
See, that's great. And if all this work wasn't impressive enough, you also have had 20 years of the White Privilege Conference. Could you tell us a little bit about that, who attends, how it's evolved over time?
Yeah, and we like to say the White Privilege Conference is a national, international conference. We know, we have evidence that shows people come from all over the globe. Two things I love about the White Privilege Conference. One, it was founded in Iowa, right? Like most people don't believe this national, international conference, 1,500, 1,800 people consistently now over the last 5 years, was founded in the small town of Mount Vernon, Iowa, at Cornell College. And I give a lot of love to Cornell for being willing to even allow me to kickstart the programming there. Now, secondly, the thing I love about the White Privilege Conference is Black owned. It's started by a Black person, ran by a Black person, unapologetically. And we just don't have a lot of those spaces out there. And so the conference, though, even though it's called the White Privilege Conference, it attracts people from all over, from all different backgrounds. And because of that, we have diverse kinds of curriculum items. We look at privilege across race, across gender identity, across class, across religion. So we're really working hard to present a comprehensive curriculum, intersectionality, when we look at privilege, remembering though, here in America, white supremacy, white privilege is one of the cornerstones, the starting stones in reference to how this nation was developed. And we can't really advance the nation into the inclusive space we want if we don't understand the unhealthy, limited, narrow design it began with white supremacy, white male culture dominance. So we're trying to hold both of those spaces in place. And again, I see some familiar faces on the screen. It's really, I'll say this in closing, Amy. I feel like a kid who had an imaginary friend that nobody believed existed. I mean, years ago, you can imagine a Black guy running across Iowa, running across the nation saying, hey, you should come to the White Privilege Conference. I mean, people were looking at me as if I lost my mind. However, I see some folks on the side that have been supporting me since I had hair, and when this white privilege thing was not really something that everybody was willing to support. So I want to send a shout out and an appreciation to them because now it finally feels like, hey, you're hearing newscasters say white supremacy, white privilege. I have schools emailing me saying, no, doc, you don't have to call it diversity. You can call it white supremacy, white privilege. And so it now feels like we're in a real moment, a real opportunity to explore some of the most difficult topics, I think, related to our nation's history. And that is this narrow, horrific, violent framework of white supremacy, white male culture dominance. And if we're gonna build the kind of society that we often talk about, we gotta focus and we gotta really understand that unhealthy start that we spent 300 plus years participating in in order to accomplish that. And that's really what we're trying to do with the White Privilege Conference, provide a space where we can talk about the toughest, the challenging issues related to building a more perfect union, and also provide a space for people who do diversity work to be evolving and advancing their skills as well.
It's great to hear that you're seeing some of the progress of what you've been working on. This is a good segue right here. I'm gonna open it up. If anybody has questions, please message them to me privately in the chat. I will ask them to you, but during this time while I start to collect questions, can you tell us right now, what are you doing? What are you seeing? You kind of started to allude to it in the last answer, but what's going on in your work right now?
Yeah, so number one, I'm really trying to be a part of this moment to really hopefully continue to keep it a movement. And as people are calling me now, reaching out to me now, I am asking them not for a one-time visit, but what can we do comprehensively? How can we involve other people? I mean, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? So in my consulting work, I'm really trying to be real intentional about transformation, transformative, radical transformation, and the kind of relationships and resources and ideas and innovation it takes to accomplish that. Secondly, I'm doing a book a year for the next 10 years. And so really excited to be in partnership with some folks as we're working on the companion book to the Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys called Teaching Beautiful, Brilliant Black Girls. I'm also working on a kid's book. Some real excitement about a kid's book idea based on my career as well. And of course, I have a family. I have an older son who's in Florida, doing his thing as a public speaker and community member. And now my wife and I, we have two little ones. I have a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old. So I'm, doing daddy duty and all of that kind of stuff, especially since I'm not on the road. So it's been really nice to reintroduce myself to my wife and the kids, because I've been out there, grinding on the road, trying to make a difference. And so those are some of the things I'm involved in right now, and really excited though, really looking forward to some real movement work as we look at these next 25 years.
That's super impressive. The one a year sounds like quite the undertaking. So I did get a question. So this is from somebody who says, I'm currently leading a book study with white women teachers on the Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys. This is our first week. We are wondering if the equity challenge that Dr. Moore has referenced would be a good companion to this book study.
Yes, it would. We are actually thinking about doing one specific to the book in reference to the 21-day action plan. But in general, the racial equity plan has been a good companion with the book. If you email me, whoever you are, and you can find my email on the website, I can connect you with Marguerite Parks. And she and I have done some work with some folks, her particularly at the university level, and really using the plan as it relates to the book. So yes, it's a great companion. Stay tuned for a specific edition of the 21-day plan for the book, and thank you for your support.
Great. So then I did get a question. It says, with a doctorate on Black football players, do you have a comment on any concerns expressed by Hawkeye players that you've seen recently?
Yeah. Believe them. So if people are telling you they experience horrific incidences in reference to racism, and it's a consistent pattern of those stories coming out, it's okay to say, you know what? I believe you. My advice to an organization, and in this case, the Hawkeyes, would be to say, you know what? We believe you. How can we do better? That's really how I think forgiveness, reconciliation happens. What I'm worried about, that if there's denial, if there's resistance, they'll just be a permanent wedge, a permanent stain almost in reference to the program, the coaches, the players. And I think this is a real moment. This is a real opportunity to do some real healing. And my advice would be to say, we believe you. We want to do better. We could sure use your help. And I think from there, that's where real repair, real healing can take place.
All right. So then next question, it says, are you optimistic about the future of race relations in America?
No. I just watched a black man die live on TV. In fact, the thing that the thing that makes me the maddest about George Floyd is I now have this 8 minutes and 46 seconds in my mind for the rest of my life. I have to be honest, it's hard for me to be optimistic. Now, I'm a 25-year plus recovering drug and alcoholic. You know, I bounced back from crack cocaine. I'm really fortunate and blessed to have a second chance at life. So I don't really operate in a spirit of pessimism either, being pessimistic. So I had to invent a new word, Amy. Optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm what I call pessimistic. Okay? Pessimistic means you're optimistic, but you're doing stuff. It's a real privilege to be optimistic and not do anything. That's what I'm worried about, is people feeling like, oh yeah, it's gonna get better. Oh yeah, we'll just hang in there. Oh yeah, just give it time. And I'm like, no. I'm okay to believe it'll be better. It'll get better. But show me some evidence of your action. And that's where the 21 day can come in as well. If you can show me at least 21 days of habit building, changing action, then I'm willing to join the optimism. So that's how I would respond to that. I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm what I call pessimistic.
All right. So then this next one is just ask them, what is the most frequently asked questions you get about your work?
I think the most frequently asked question is actually me being called into question in reference to Black leadership, Black genius, Black excellence. I mean, even from our publications, you know, people asking, is there research involved in this publication? Even in the planning of the conference, it's almost like people are saying, well, there must be someone that's in charge that's not you. My biggest question for me is actually the consistency in which I get called into question as a Black leader, as a Black scholar, as a Black genius. And so that's really what I think I face most consistently, is not a consistent question, a consistency of being called into question about my credentials, about my publications, about my experience, so on and so forth.
Right. So what do you think institutes of higher education could do right now to make a change?
Well, I mean, I think what they can do, I would ask, and what they should do, I would suggest, is seize this moment as a chance to reinvent yourself. It's almost like that old Jay-Z song, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is whatever, right? So I saw actually Loras College looking at what I think they were calling like a hybrid model. I forget what they were calling, Loras Plus or something. And I was thinking, yeah, that's cool, like offering some real innovation. Because I think it's true. I mean, in the last 3 months, the world has literally changed right before our eyes. What I'm hoping universities will do is use this as an opportunity to reinvent themselves. That we don't get back to the new normal of white supremacy, the new normal of sexism, homophobia, racism, like the disparities. I mean, we have a real opportunity to address some of the real unhealthy stuff that was happening across, let's just take higher education. And this is the moment I hope that institutions will take the chance, take the opportunity to reinvent themselves.
Right, and then as a follow-up to that, how can we better evaluate, identify, and support gifted Black students?
Not use white tests, right? I think that what we now know is much of the testing, the evaluation, the assessment for genius was designed by white supremacy, white male cultural dominance. So one thing we can do is really present some other opportunities to demonstrate what genius looks like, particularly amongst different cultures of people, in this case, Black culture. And so I think, and this is something we're seeing, actually thinking about reinventing yourself for higher ed, people even drop those tests in reference to, test scores and all of that. And I think it's okay to be assessing and evaluating, doing better and grading and all of that. But I think when the test is designed by white supremacy, throw it away. And I think that would help. That would go a long way in better identifying Black genius. And what we found in particularly the Black Boy book, and the research shows this, there's no difference in IQ. But when you go to talented and gifted classrooms or schools where talented and gifted programs exist, I mean, it looks as if white people were born with genes that say they're smarter. And we just know that's not true. So bias is playing a part in that. And so I would say, throw that doggone test away. Reconsider how we evaluate genius. Offer some other opportunities. Foster some other ways in which, support some other ways in which we can extract Black genius, particularly in predominantly white or historically white institutions, which are not designed to foster Black genius, Black excellence, people of color genius, people of color excellence. Actually, they were designed to destroy Black genius. And so we just got to reconsider, I would argue, reconfigure, re-examine what that process looks like. And I think that will begin to give us some better results.
Right, and then I have a question from a parent. What can a parent do to expose and teach young children about racism?
Yeah, I think two things I think off the top of my head. Start early. Professor Ibram X. Kendi just did the Anti-Racist Baby book. I think that's a great example. There's some other books out there, whether it's about hair, whether it's about skin color. The biggest thing is to start early. Secondly, I always say kids don't just pay attention to what you say, kids watch what you do. If you are talking diversity but live in segregation, you're sending mixed messages. So make sure, in addition to starting early, that you most importantly role model the kind of community, the kind of environment, the kind of the support, the kind of relationships you want your kids to also foster, support, fight for, so on and so forth.
All right. So I do have, actually, that was probably our last question for now. But I did want to, I watched a talk previously where you had said, talking about, racism that you encounter in your own life. And you had said the quote, there are some pancakes you just can't flip. And I really appreciated that. So I don't know if you could just, in closing, maybe expand upon when you encounter racism in your life and maybe an action you can take there.
Yeah, that pancake story extends from two things. One, sometimes people, when I've been doing the work in the Midwest, tell me stories about family members. And myself, I've encountered some folks who may be a little narrow. No matter what research you show them, what books you show them, what articles you give them, they're not changing. And that's where I came up with this phrase, there's some pancakes you'll never flip over. And so I think for me, one thing I'm not giving up on folks, but I'm saying I'm not giving them folks all my energy. And strategies are, give them articles, have the conversation, right? Be willing to listen, be willing to not be attacking, not to be degrading, right? But open and inviting. So all those kinds of things are really important tactics. Let me say this, because one of my greatest frustrations with Iowa, even though I love Iowa, Iowa's done so much for me. My biggest frustration, I feel like there are more good people in Iowa than there are bad people, in my experience. But the thing that frustrates me the most is good people who are quiet. Right? That's where my frustration lies. I mean, I think this is the one skill, this is the one thing I'm asking people to do. the best friend that hate has is silence. So if you can do anything as we move forward, as we look at this time we're in, I'm hoping we don't squander this moment. I'm really hoping we don't miss this opportunity, because people died. Family members lost their life for us to be at this moment where people are now even willing to listen or talk about or say white privilege. And I hope we don't let this moment pass. And if there's anything you can do to get started, is at least say something, because the best friend that hate has is silence. And that's my biggest frustration. It's not the racist. I like my racism like cognac, strong. I like it in my face. Tell me how you really feel. I appreciate that. My biggest frustration is good people with good hearts who say nothing. When they know it's wrong, they know it's oppressive, and they say nothing. That's the biggest challenge I would give us leaving this talk as we look ahead over these next 25 years. Minimally say something. And so that's what I would say in closing in reference to that.
Yeah, this has been so helpful, and your career has been very impressive. I can say that we're definitely proud to have you as an alumni of the University of Iowa. We've linked to a couple of your web pages, so check that out in the chat. It goes to the 21-day challenge, which an individual can go and take some steps to educate themselves, and then also to the Privilege Institute, which works with organizations. And on those, you should be able to find contact information for Dr. Moore as well. So I want to thank you for coming, and I also want to thank everyone for attending. We do have another chat from the old cap next week. It's with Jason Snell. He is a multimedia artist who can compose live music with his mind. He will be wearing a brain monitor to his head. He's from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and he's going to demonstrate how he manipulates synthesizers and drum machines using only his brainwaves. So go ahead and check that out. There is a registration link also in the chat. But thank you again, Dr. Moore. We really appreciate it. And please follow up via the links if you have any questions or comments.
All right, Amy, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you're looking forward to a 501c3, you can support, look up the Privilege Institute. But no matter what, holla at a brother. I see some of y'all out there I haven't heard from in a while. So will you holla at me, please? Amy, great job. Thank you.